Hi, this is a video response to Peter Joseph's three questions. I'm not going to try and answer each one specifically, but I do want to make a couple comments about what I think can work and what has to be considered before you abandon the system entirely and jump onto something completely different that's never been tried. The resource-based economy, I think, is unrealistic. Because people always need to exchange something, even if it's just services, because we have everything automated. So there's always going to be a need for a market. I don't think that it's necessarily the market that's the problem. It's more how the market functions, and what I mean is, since it's capitalistic and everyone's out for themselves, it's more a competitive market instead of a market of exchange. Now, figuring out how to make a system that would perpetuate exchange and choice without creating competition, that's something that needs to be figured out. And I think that disregarding the political influences and trying to change laws and go through the government, in the video, or he, completely basically says, we don't need to change laws or anything. We just need to change the system. Well, all the power for the whole country and the way that everything works comes down to the government. That's the rule of law. So you can't really change anything unless you change the rule of law. And I understand that it's been completely corrupted by special interests and corporations and people with a lot of money, and it's become a plutocracy. That's clear, but influencing it, getting people to care and actually take back that power and change the political system or the government system itself to better represent what people want, and then create a way for new ideas and new ways of doing things to be introduced so that we can have more of a emergent society, which Peter talks about. Obviously, I have a ton of respect for Peter and all the information that he's put out. I'm trying to share that in my own way through films. I'm actually a filmmaker. But I also question some, obviously some of the solutions that I've come up with some myself, and I think that you actually need to focus on the political system and the government in order to have any substantial change. But you also have to have a really solid, realistic alternative, and I don't think the resource-based economy is a realistic thing, and I don't think that's even been tried or clearly even defined. It's kind of vague, let's just use the resources. Okay, well, there's a lot of logistical problems with actually doing that and serving the needs of everyone, and having that be done immediately, because every minute, even if it took a day to do, you'd have millions of deaths. People depend on a lot of things in the market. So your transition to something else has to be either extremely fast or gradual, and it has to be to something that is going to be realistic, where people can actually still have exchanges and exchange services and create things and get people on board to do things like you can with businesses. Now, I don't figuring out again how to make that possible while reducing the competitive mechanism and using automation to the advantage of the public, instead of private interests who just take these massive production capability and just basically leech off the public with that their position of advantage. Again, it gets really complicated because there's a lot of philosophy about free markets and people being able to start a business and run a business and grow a business. And, you know, you start getting into socialist ideologies when you say, well, you know, there's this problem and there's this automation, so we want to take that and just use it for us, and it's gets really tricky because who is the public or who is everyone to go and to a company that's already been established and tell them that now they have to hand over everything they can do because now we have you know, resource-based economy, and we're just going to use your production facilities to make stuff for us for free. I just think the whole idea of everything just being given away, it sounds nice, and it actually, in some ways, if you created a system that actually did perpetuate abundance, then, you know, a lot of things could be extremely cheap or free, but you can't just give away everything and expect the world to still function. People have to be involved. People have to do things. They have to, you know, go to work, even if it's only a few hours a week or, you know, one day a week, because we've created such efficiency that we can reduce the work week or reduce the work day because now there's this huge abundance and, you know, ability to create, and it doesn't take people going to work every day, 5 days a week, to achieve the same thing that we can or that we could, or that we could before. So I think a lot of the work weeks are, it's really just dependent on greed, because as long as money can be made off of people, then they'll just keep employing them for as long as they can. So, you know, it doesn't, the evolution of our ability to produce abundance through technology isn't being used for the advantage of people. It's just being used for the advantage of individuals. And again, I'm sorry, back to the three questions. I really think that it's not the market economy. I don't think that it's exchange. I think that that's kind of ridiculous to say, you know, well, the problem is that we have any exchange. We just need to make everything completely automated and give everything away for free. I think it's really dangerous. And what people, my view on that has changed. I think that that's not a good way to do things. Now, again, developing another system that could create more equality and abundance that doesn't function on profit the same way, and there isn't the same competitive thing going on. If you could figure out a way to just have exchange and remove all of the artificial problems that exist. I mean, if you changed the Fed and made that, you know, a government institution, and we weren't owing all this interest and, you know, a lot of things Peter's talked about, that's not a problem. If you get rid of government corruption by, you know, changing the government, and I've got a lot of ideas on how we can do that, and I'm going to put that in my films. But if you make the government more representative of the people, I think that you see more, it'll become more equal on its own, because people can vote for things that are going to protect them, that are going to help small businesses, that are, you know, that just would, you know, create a real, true kind of regulation, what the government is supposed to do that it's not doing. And as for creating something that's going to have more respect for the environment and be more, you know, promote more equality, that's something that really needs to be thought about, and also the realistic change in how that could even come about, because people are so locked into how this works now. Yeah, so maybe some kind of dual economy, something like that, where you have basic necessity produced by a kind of socialist, you know, system, like where you do automate things and you use efficiency and you make, you've seen these efficient building structures being built out of, basically like a giant 3D printer that prints out concrete. Those are pretty amazing. I mean, just making the basic needs fulfilled through the use of the technology that we know about, like geothermal power and using electric and creating better public transportation, and all of those things are actually things that can be introduced through the government and voted on so that the public can decide to pay for it, through taxes instead of paying for wars. And if we can have more say in the government, then we could say, look, we don't want to go to these wars. We know that you're using it for profit so that these, the military industrial complex can make billions of dollars, so these private contractors can make billions of dollars, and it isn't, and oil companies can make billions of dollars. We know that these things aren't justified. If you ask, most people in the country who haven't been completely brainwashed by the media, they'll tell you they don't want to be at war. Nobody really wants to be in war, but yet we have no say. No one feels like they have a voice at all. Give them their voice back, end the wars, reduce that cost, take that money, use it on, efficiency and, and technology that makes the public's life better and more abundant that way. And I think you'd see a big change in lifestyle, especially of the poor, or what you would call the poor, those who are economically disadvantaged. Because if you started creating things like vertical farms, aquaponic or hydroponic farms that were produced by the community, which is really what the government's supposed to do. If the government wasn't completely idiotic and set up to work, I think I've read like it's like 15 years in the past, but it's actually more than that, because it's running on a lot of things that were in place from when it was designed. So if you fix those things and you actually make the government represent people and work as more of a communal decision maker for things that we know are important, then you can actually say, okay, let's make maglev trains and put our money in that instead of war. All right, let's make abundant, organic, localized food through these vertical farms. We as a community decide that's a good idea. We want to build them in our cities, and we want to have that available. We want to have better public transportation. We want to have power that comes from geothermal power. We want to have all these things that increase efficiency and make it so that the lives of everyone are better and more efficient can be done, I feel like, that way, at least to start out. Then, as the community has that kind of power to produce abundance, you can kind of outgrow the need for a lot of the private institutions who are just doing what they do for profit in themselves, and you could create more of a type of community. Not to say that any private institution is bad, and that's where I say you still need to have some kind of exchange process. So there has to be private entities, because a private entity is a person, or a business, and then you can get into problems with the exploitation and all of that. Again, you can change how that works with the government. You can change the rules. The rule of law can be determined by the people. If you think that it's wrong for companies to completely, well, that actually, it's more personal responsibility. You should boycott the companies, but people aren't really organized enough to do those types of things that they should be, but they're not. But maybe if you could create more of a sense of community, people could work more in unison to do those types of things. Like, we're not going to support this business because they only pay people, 50 cents. But then again, I understand a lot of that comes from the market design itself, like Peter explained in one of his, I think it was Z-Day 2014. His example with Jeff. And that lecture, I believe it starts at 36 minutes. He starts explaining that. I actually referenced that before in a comment. But it's really a very complicated thing. I definitely think we need to get a lot of great minds together to try and solve the problem and create something that's going to be realistic and a realistic transition. But we do realize that, or we must realize that there is a problem that's going on, and that the way things are working are extremely destructive and wasteful, and things need to change. So in that sense, I agree completely with Peter, and I respect what he's exposed, and I think it's very true, and all the information needs to be looked at. The solutions to the problems need to be well crafted, and that is something that needs to be given more thought, and again, by people who are experts in these types of things, in social engineering and economy and economics. I mean, and come up with, you put enough great minds together with a common goal of what you're trying to do, and you have enough creative people, enough smart people in there, and you're going to come up with something that's going to be amazing. So I would say try and organize that and come up with a design that everyone can agree on. And when you can find something that the Republican people can agree on, and the Democratic people can agree on, and I won't get into the ignorance of what those teams are, but something that everyone can see how things can still function within whatever it is you come up with, then you'll have a real solution, and then you can try and push for that. But again, I don't think disregarding the government is a good idea. I think that you really need to get more involved in trying to change that, trying to get that to represent the people, and that's what I really am trying to work on myself, by waking people up to that reality. It's really important that people get involved and make sure their voice is heard, and make sure the government actually represents them, which again, it's not doing that. So then at that point, then you can start instigating real change through that power structure that already exists, which will be difficult, but I believe that's the way to do it. That's where you need to go. The rule of law, the rule of how everything works is right there. That's a power right there. So I'd say be more concerned about that. And that's a really long-winded answer to 3 pretty short questions that aren't, I didn't actually answer specifically. I didn't go over the questions and the answers, but I think that this response does, in a way, answer all 3 of them. All right, thanks.